The only people who would root for an Aztec Batman are either completely ignorant of history or they're sociopaths who want the world to revert to barbarism. If you know anything about Batman lore, which you probably shouldn't, then you know that he doesn't kill anyone. Going back to the 1940s, it's been understood that Batman goes out of his way to preserve human life and animal life. He won't indiscriminately open fire on criminals and innocent bystanders with heavy weaponry, even though it'd be a lot easier most of the time. That's just not how Batman operates. He sneaks in the shadows and takes the pacifist route. The old animated series would use this restriction as a source of comic relief. Instead of stabbing a shark that was about to eat him, for example, Batman asked Robin to toss him some shark-repellent bat spray, then boom, pow, crisis averted. He would also use batarangs, smoke bombs, various environmental hazards to dispatch his enemies. Although it was really bad for the climate, most of it. Yes, Tim Burton's Batman set henchmen on fire, blew people up, threw bad guys off tall buildings. That's true, but every rule has an exception. It's fair to say that in general, particularly in the animated shows, the writers had to get somewhat clever in order to avoid turning Batman into a killer. They had to play with the laws of physics and basic logic a little bit, but they got it done. And that said, as impressive as these old Batman writers were, it's become clear that the new crop of Batman writers are going to have to be much, much more creative than their predecessors. If the old Batman shows were the equivalent of Apollo 11, the one where we landed on the moon, then the new Batman show is going to be Apollo 13 levels of difficulty. They'll have to fit that square peg into a round hole in the writer's room day in and day out. They'll have to employ every imaginable trick in the book if they want to keep this whole no-kill thing going. In the process, they'll have to rewrite history and constantly insult the viewer's intelligence. And indeed, it appears that that's exactly what they plan on doing. So behold, the first trailer for the upcoming Batman feature film from Warner Brothers. You've heard that wokeness is dead, but I think this trailer will show that reports of its demise may have been premature. Watch this.
A wise man told me once, fear can kill you or inspire you to action.
My son, when you take my place, it'll be your duty to always be ready for battle.
What are those?
My hands control the power of destiny. What I want is gold.
Impossible. We have strict rules in place that forbid this.
Rules are rules.
Slaughter them all!
Are you all right? Where's your father?
I'm going to stop Cortez. I want you to train me to become the greatest warrior that the world has ever known.
Even with all of your training, I still can't defeat them.
If only there was somebody who was stealthy. Find that bat and that cat.
Put your trust in me. Cortez must stand and face my vengeance.
Not vengeance, but through sacrifice.
You've been given a sacred mission. And whether you accept it or not, it's the truth.
Tell us, war leader, what are your orders?
Attack!
Yes, Batman is now an Aztec warrior. Instead of Bruce Wayne, his name is Yohuli Koto. I don't know. And this time around, his father gets killed by Hernán Cortés, who acts as Two-Face in this rendition, having had half his face scarred during an assassination attempt of some kind. The Joker is also a crazy Aztec priest, evidently, so they're trying to create parallel versions of all the old characters. But at this point, it's not clear exactly how far these parallels will go, and that's an important question that these writers are going to have to resolve. In the original comics, for example, Batman's father was a guy named Dr. Thomas Wayne. He was a very renowned surgeon. I'm telling you all this because I'm an expert on comic book lore. And he made a lot of money, that his surgeon did by cutting people up and fixing them. So how exactly is that going to translate to this new film, Aztec Batman Clash of Empires? One can only speculate. I obviously haven't seen the new film, but we can assume that the father of Yohallicotl will also be a very famous surgeon. And that makes sense after all. Of course, for the Aztecs, being a famous surgeon meant that you took the heart out, but you didn't put it back in. That's the slight but very important distinction that needs to be drawn. There's no transplant. They weren't fixing the heart. They would take it out, and that was it. You see, they used a knife to rip the hearts out of their captives, including children, while they were still beating, before they would eat them or burn them as an offering to the gods. Other than that, it's pretty much a one-to-one parallel. Batman's dad would replace the heart when he was done, and the Aztecs didn't bother with that. So they get half credit at least, and probably good enough. At this point, you're thinking that this is a terrible idea for a film and that no sane person should watch it or would watch it. But I have to say two things. First, you're obviously right. But second, don't overlook the fact that there's a lot of other humor you can draw from this very ill-fated and stupid idea. People are already drawing up storyboards for potential scenes, and here's one of them. We'll put it on the screen. In case you're listening to the audio podcast, the Aztec Joker says, "That's right, Guano Man, I'm holding the T.O. Pixie hostage, and you'll never find him." And Batman responds, "You monster, without him, we can't sacrifice enough children to make the sun rise." Then the Joker cackles and says, "The children will live, and there's nothing you can do about it." Now, it's just like that scene where the Joker is threatening to blow up the boats in the Nolan movies, basically. A scene that I hated, by the way. It's a terrible scene. Terrible way to end the film. I've already made that case. But in this case, you have to kind of invert morality, and it fits perfectly. In any event, the bigger point is Aztec Batman is somehow going to avoid killing people, even though the Aztecs were constantly killing everyone, even their own children. So how's that going to work exactly? Presumably, they're going to recast the conquistadors as cartoon villains. You can see that in the trailer, which has become something of a trend lately in third-rate media. There's also currently a game in development where players can play as a lone Aztec warrior who somehow defeats the conquistadors. And here's what that looks like. So the Aztecs might not have any armor or horses or guns or steel swords or lances, but they have this one guy sneaking around, eliminating all the conquistadors one by one. It's obviously supposed to be a power fantasy intended for a mostly Mexican audience, but power fantasies like this don't work when they're based on a very clear historical record, one in which the Aztecs were completely eliminated due to their, among other things, inadequate technology, the fact that they were living, 3,000 years in the past, and were replaced by a far more functional and in every way superior civilization. So either this game involves dying constantly as soon as you start playing, or it's a cruel reminder of how successful the Aztecs could have been if only they hadn't been evil, backwards, and bloodthirsty. That's the main problem with Aztec Batman as well. The reason the Batman comics and films work in general is that Batman restores order to society. That's why he's easy to cheer for. Catches the bank robbers and the murderers and guys in weird masks who detonate bombs in the middle of Heinz Field. And in doing so, Batman allows people to go about their normal, productive lives. By contrast, the Aztecs were the single largest impediment to human progress in the 15th century, other than the plague. They were cannibals. They were murderers. They murdered hundreds of thousands of their own people every year. They didn't care about establishing stable governance or trade routes or technological advancement. They were focused single-mindedly on expansion, and the Europeans expanded also. But in this case, the expansion was so that they could acquire more humans to sacrifice. That was the driving motivation, was just more people that they could sacrifice to their fate gods. And while the Aztecs were carving up their own children and dancing around like cavemen, Europeans were developing the printing press and building ships instead of canoes and creating great works of literature, achieving breakthroughs in mathematics and science. Therefore, the only people who would root for an Aztec Batman are either completely ignorant of history or they're sociopaths who want the world to revert to barbarism. Attacking Cortez by equating him with Two-Face is particularly idiotic. Cortez was not a schizophrenic district attorney or anything close to one. His story, like the story of the conquistadors, is fascinating and incredible and heroic. These were some of the great heroes of history. With virtually no military experience to speak of and at great personal risk, he went rogue in 1518 and unilaterally decided to secure the interior of Mexico for Spain. He had only about 500 men in total, about a dozen horses, and he landed in Maya territory and ended up taking down the single most powerful Mesoamerican civilization, which is the Aztecs, which had a population of several million people. And he did it with brains, and he did it with force, and he did it with diplomacy. He aligned with the tribes the Aztecs had subjugated and carved up. He won over slaves and natives of the Aztecs, whom he converted to Christianity by the tens of thousands. And then, after introducing order and Christianity to Mexico, he built a major city and established a functioning and far more civilized colonial government. This is a story that most people don't know very much about. That's the only reason why anyone would even consider watching Aztec Batman. They'd have to be completely unaware of basic historical facts, which is why we need to respond to this stuff not just by commenting on it and criticizing it, although we should do that too. And it's easy to do with something as stupid as Aztec Batman. But everything I just outlined, the true history of Cortez and the conquistadors, which I talked about many times on this show, would make for a ridiculously entertaining show or series. So why hasn't anyone made that yet? Why aren't conservatives funding and creating that kind of content? Why instead have we ceded this genre to Warner Brothers in this insulting, low-effort slop piece of a Batman film? Those are questions that hopefully will be answered very soon, and along with the question of how exactly Warner Brothers plans to create an Aztec Batman who doesn't kill anyone, even Aztec children. But until we get clarity on those points, as of today, Aztec Batman and everyone cheering the historical revisionism around Cortez and conquistadors are today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.